I love him.
So guys, this is the single for my new song Dreaded Phone Call. I put a lot of time and effort into making it, so I hope you enjoy it, and I will play the full project now so you can get a feeling for what we're gonna do today.
Hello? Hey. Yeah, I know. I've been meaning to call, but there's just something I gotta tell you that I can't. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to say this, but I've met someone else. Stop. I love him. Don't stop. Goodbye.
So as you have heard probably, there are two different drops. One is
Met someone
here.
else.
And then the second one over here.
And I love him.
Although they're similar in the arrangement, the pattern in which the parts are played is very different. I would say this is more of a Marshmello kind of drop, where you have the 4 to the floor kick with the snare. And there's like a little fill here, but it's pretty much 4 to the floor for this section. But this section is a more trap kind of beat.
Don't stop.
Okay, so I guess I'm gonna start with the drums, if we're already talking about the drums. Important thing in future bass is that you have a lot of fills. And I have a bunch of fills here. We have this kind of... it's a recording of a crowd in New York at an exhibition room 3. And I play it like a one-shot to fill in some spaces where after the snare hits. So here's the snare, it hits, then you hear the crowd, and there's nothing else going on while then except for like the percussion, but the main chords, they're not playing at that time. Yeah. And next up I have some reverse snares. So the reverse snare helps to go into the real snare like this. So it's like a build up to the snare, and that's on every snare, like on this one, and on this one. You can see there's a reverse before. And at the end of every 4 bars, there's a small little drum fill. This one. And I also put like some little vocal fills here.
Don't stop.
And this drum fill is very prevalent. Yeah, this is the same drum fill. So these just repeat. The only thing that changes is instead of the don't stop vocal shot, I have like a little water droplet here. Yeah. So that's with the fills. Next up, we're gonna look at the loop percussion. We have these branch loops I made myself. So you don't really hear it when you're listening to the song, but it's definitely there. It's not very prevalent, but it adds to the overall feeling. And next up we have this hi-hat sound. Yeah, so pretty basic hi-hat sound. And of course I have the kick. It's a reverse kick into the first drop, into the drop, so it's like vroom. And it's also here after 8 bars. So that's it about the percussion. Next up, I'm gonna talk about the chords and bass. Basically the main meat of the drop. So I'm gonna start from the top. We have this utility, very important, to sidechain everything inside the group. So the bass, the arpeggio, and the big saw chords. You can see here there's a small dip in the volume. It's whenever the kick or snare hits. And I completely turned off the volume, or turned down the volume, I should say, when the snare hits. So the snare hits here and here, basically on every 0.3. So 0.3, 25.3 hits here and there. Not here, but then again here and here. Yeah. So that's when I turn the volume completely off in these gaps. And the reason why you want to do that is because there's a lot of like reverb on the chords, and you can hear it like bleed into the next part, and you want it to be very at least I want it to be very quiet when the snare hits. Yeah, so it feels more punchy. The snare basically, it feels like the snare stops the sound. So here's the MIDI for the chords in my drop. I was using the G major scale, and I'm gonna run you through my chord progression before giving you general tips and tricks on how to build your own chord progressions. So my chord progression goes like this. The first one is a C major 9th chord, then we have an A minor 9th chord, then a E suspended 2 chord, a F sharp diminished chord, a C major 9th chord, a D suspended 2 chord, a minor 9th chord, and a G major 9th chord. So generally when you're making future bass, you want to stay in one key. As I said, I was using the G major key, and all the notes I used are in the G major key. You can use borrowed chords or notes if you want to, But for me, staying in one key is a lot easier than trying to make other notes fit into your chord progression. Now let's get into sound design. So first up, we have this wavetable. And this wavetable sounds like this by itself. Let me mute everything else. Yeah, so there we go. It's kind of an odd or unique sound, but I like it. And the reason why it changes is because of this automation. I put the automation on the what do you call this? The wavetable position. The wavetable position of the second oscillator. So you can see that it changes the wave it plays. That's why the sound changes. And because it's a very harmonically rich waveform, it kind of changes the melody, I guess you could say. Yeah. So next up we have this wavetable, another wavetable. And this one is just a basics sub 1 wavetable. It's pitched 24 semitones up and it just plays straight. Only reason why you hear some movement is because of the sidechain, which is very heavy sidechain. Also typical for future bass, you sidechain the shit out of everything. So next up, this is I would say like the main sound of the chords. Okay, so I'm most familiar in working with Serum, and Serum was just the first VST, virtual instrument, I got, and it's great. I put the LFO1 on 18th notes on the amplitude. You can see here, LFO1, full amount, and it modulates the amplitude. So as the sound plays, the volume goes up and down very fast. And then I have some hyper on there. The hyper is turned all the way down, but the dimension is a little bit up. Also a multiband compression. Tiny bit of, no gain at all. And then a little bit of reverb. So next up, let's look at the effects. So we have an EQ here for the, it's only on the saw, on this one. And it cuts out all the low end and really boosts like the midpoint at 958 hertz. And it turns down some of the lows. On the other ones I didn't put any EQs. And then there's this EQ that's on all of them. And you can see I put the mode into MS, so you have one EQ for the mids and one for the side. So for the mids, I let through a little bit more of the bass. And for the side, I cut out most of the bass, but boosted the highs a little bit more. So next up I use a dimension expander. It's an Xfer Records plugin. It's for free. You can check it out on the website. Not sponsored, by the way. But it makes the chord sound wider, because you can hear if I turn it off, it's very mono. It's in the middle. Sounds kind of I don't like it. So if I put it on, it gets really wide, and like you feel like you're surrounded by the chords, which I really liked. Yeah, and this one I don't use, so I could actually like delete it. Yeah. Okay. So that's a chord. Next up, let's go to the bass. The bass line just copies the chords, so it plays the root of every chord. Okay, so the bass line or the bass sound is made out of two different operators. No, one operator and one wavetable. So first up we have the sub bass and operator. It's a triangle wave, simple triangle wave, which is getting saturated a lot by a saturation knob by Softube. And also the entire sound is getting EQ'd by this EQ. So this like simple sub bass, you always need it. And then the more interesting sound is this wavetable. This wavetable. Which is the noise from the noise collection. It's the wavetable swept noise. And I'm using 𝕄𝔸𝔾ℕ𝕀𝔽𝕀, which is very, very subtle. Yeah, like 2%. So the peak is at 52% and it goes down to 50% over 2 seconds. And that controls the oscillator 1 wavetable position. Basically, you can see that it moves a little bit through the wavetable, through different waveforms. And that makes it sound more interesting and not as static. And also, like the main part of the sound is this saw LFO, I guess, saw down is what you call it. And it's on 8th notes, same as the chords. So it's da 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 da. Yeah. And that's the bass. Lastly, there's this ARP on top of everything. Sounds like very magical, I guess. And you use arpeggiator for that. So I just copy the chords and then put arpeggiator on it. And have this patch, this wavetable patch. It's harmonics times 1. And this time it's getting modulated by LFO2, by this LFO, which is just doing bringing some movement into the sound, so it doesn't sound as boring. And then there's a simple saw wave on there as well. Excuse me. A second oscillator is a saw wave. Yeah, and you can see the amplitude envelope over here. It's a very quick attack, 0 milliseconds. Quite short decay. So it's a short sound. And then you have delay on there. And reverb. And you cut out all of the mid and lows. Let's see what it sounds like without the EQ actually. I want to hear. Yeah, so it's a very thin, but it just adds that little bit extra sprinkling, so it's not empty. I felt like something was missing, so I added that. And also auto pan, so it goes left and right. If you're using headphones, you can hear it. So it will go from your left channel to your right channel and back and forth on half notes. Yeah. So that is the first drop. And everything together. Okay, so let's go to the second drop.
I love him.
Don't stop.
Okay, so there's a main melody in here that's different. So let's talk about that first. I am having some problems with coming up with melodies, but I like this one. It's one of my better ones, and I can admit that. So this sound, let's talk about the sound, is made out of a bunch of presets. So there's that. And you could say like there's this plucky sound. I mean this one. And then there's this weird, I don't know what you would call this, like alien whistle. And then there's this brass-like sound. I feel like it sounds kind of like 80s brass. So all together. Okay, and for this one, I use the shaper, Max for Life shaper. You can download it. Oh no, actually it's part of the Ableton Suite version. So the display is a little bit fucked up here, but it still works. You just draw in your shape, and then you automate whatever you want with this shape. So this is basically like an LFO in Serum, and I put it on utility, and it ducks the volume whenever the kick hits. Just like it's going up basically. And then yeah, it's the same chords, same sound, just that's the difference. The kick and snare pattern is changed, and yeah, you have that.
Don't stop.
Goodbye.